Once upon a gentle morning, when the sky was pale blue and the clouds moved as slowly as drifting feathers, a little girl woke in a small village at the edge of a great forest. The village was quiet at that hour. Smoke curled from chimneys and thin gray ribbons, roosters called once, then twice, then seemed to doze again, and the narrow cobblestone paths between cottages gleamed faintly with dew. The girl was called Little Red Riding Hood, though her name had once been something else. People had begun to call her by the name of her cloak, and in time, the name became hers. Her cloak was bright red, the color of apples in autumn and poppies in the field. It had been sewn by her grandmother, who had chosen the color to be cheerful and strong, a color that would glow even when the forest shadows grew long. Whenever the girl wore it, she felt wrapped in her grandmother's love, as if every stitch held a kind thought and every fold was a hug. She tied the cloak carefully at her neck, the hood resting lightly on her hair, and stepped outside her family's cottage. The morning air greeted her with cool fingers, brushing her cheeks. She breathed deeply. The scent of wood smoke lingered, mixed with wildflowers, bread baking somewhere nearby, and the faint sweetness of clover carried in from the fields. The village stirred slowly, as though it preferred not to rush into the day. A baker carried loaves warm from the oven to the shop's window, their golden crusts crackling gently. A woman swept her doorstep, her broom whispering across the stones. A cat stretched on a windowsill, blinked once at Red Riding Hood, then closed its eyes again. Red Riding Hood waved to her neighbors as she walked. "Good morning," she called softly. "Good morning," they answered, voices low and friendly. At the edge of the village, where the cobblestones gave way to earth, she paused. Before her stretched the forest, green and deep, waiting with its endless paths and secrets. The forest was not frightening, not in this telling. It was vast and filled with shadows, yes, but it was also gentle, steady, and kind. Its tall trees stood like guardians, their branches spreading wide, their roots weaving patterns in the soil. Sunlight streamed between the leaves and beams that looked like ladders of gold. The air smelled of moss, pine, and the sweetness of damp earth. Birdsong echoed from branch to branch. The notes rose and fell like questions and answers, like greetings passed among friends. The forest hummed softly with insects, with the rustle of leaves, with the endless murmur of a brook that wound its way unseen. Red Riding had stepped onto the path. The earth was soft beneath her shoes, packed by many footsteps but cushioned with pine needles and moss. Her cloak swayed behind her, brushing the air, leaving a faint trail of red against the green. She liked the forest. She liked how it changed with every step, light shifting, shadows sliding, birds darting, breezes whispering. It was never the same twice, and yet it was always welcoming. Red Riding Hood was not walking without purpose. She carried a basket in her hand, covered with a cloth to keep its contents safe. Inside lay a small loaf of fresh bread, a jar of golden honey, and a handful of ripe berries. The bread had been baked that morning, the honey gathered from a kindly neighbor, the berries picked yesterday and still sweet with summer. The basket was for her grandmother, who lived in a cottage deeper in the forest. Grandmother was gentle and wise, her hair silver as moonlight, her eyes bright as lanterns. She had once sewn the red cloak, her stitches neat and full of love. She often told stories by the fire, stories about the stars, about the brook, about the way the forest spoke to those who listened carefully. "Take these to your grandmother," Red Riding Hood's mother had said, placing the basket in her hands. "Walk the path, go kindly, and greet the forest as you pass through." And so she did. The path stretched before her like a ribbon unrolling. Her cloak caught the sun, glowing against the trees. The basket swung gently in her hand. Red Riding Hood walked at the forest's pace. Not too fast, not too slow. Just steady, like a lullaby rocking back and forth. She noticed flowers at the edge of the path. Their petals leaned toward the light, their colors soft, pale blue, golden yellow, soft white. She bent to smell them, and the air around her filled with sweetness. She picked one or two, carefully, and tucked them into her basket beside the bread and honey. Birds darted above her. One robin landed on a branch close by, tilting its head. "Good morning," Red Riding Hood whispered. The bird chirped once in reply, then fluttered away, as if to guide her deeper along the path. The forest welcomed her, step by step, sound by sound, scent by scent. And though she walked alone, she did not feel lonely. She felt accompanied by trees, by birds, by flowers, by the soft rhythm of the world itself. Underscore 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 underscore. She did not yet know that another traveler was wandering the forest that same morning. A traveler with gray fur and golden eyes, paws that pressed softly into the earth, and ears that caught every sound. A traveler who was not cruel, not in this telling, but simply curious. The wolf. Little Red Riding Hood walked with steady steps along the winding path. Her red cloak brushed against the ferns, its folds whispering like soft wings. The basket in her hand felt light but important, each item inside chosen with care. A loaf of bread, golden and crusty, its scent still clinging from the morning's oven. A jar of honey, sealed tight, its golden light caught within glass. A handful of berries, ripe and red, their juice sweet as summer rain. And now, a few flowers she had picked, petals soft as sighs, resting gently among the food. Each time the basket swayed, the scents mingled, warm bread, sweet honey, bright berries, and soft flowers. The mixture was comforting, like a lullaby for her senses. The path itself seemed alive, curling gently through the trees. It never ran straight, but wound in soft curves, as though it wanted to make her journey pleasant, offering her a new sight at every turn. Sometimes it dipped low into a hollow where ferns crowded thick and green. Sometimes it rose slightly, offering her glimpses of sunlight streaming between the trees like golden curtains. The ground was soft with pine needles, their scent rich and grounding. Mushrooms sprouted here and there, their caps round like tiny umbrellas. Butterflies floated in pairs, drifting lazily in the dappled light. Red Riding Hood paused often, not because she was tired, but because she loved to notice. She crouched to watch an ant carry a crumb twice its size, determined and patient. She followed the zigzag flight of a dragonfly, its wings shimmering blue and green. She touched the bark of an oak tree, rough and ridged, and pressed her ear against it, imagining she could hear the deep hum of its long life. Each step felt like a small discovery. Each breath felt like a gift from the forest. The forest seemed to send her companions so she would not walk alone. A squirrel leapt from branch to branch above her, chattering softly as though narrating her journey. Now and then it paused to nibble an acorn, its tail flicking like a feathered flag. A pair of doves cooed from a nest tucked high in a fir tree. Their sound was low and soothing, like the murmur of voices beside a hearth. Red Riding Hood tilted her head, listening, her heart full of calm. Farther on, a deer stepped onto the path ahead. Its slender legs moved with quiet grace, its ears twitching at every sound. For a moment, it stood still, gazing at her with eyes dark and deep as pools. Red Riding Hood held her breath, smiling softly. Then, with a flick of its tail, the deer bounded away, vanishing into the shadows. Every creature seemed to acknowledge her presence. Not startled, not frightened, only aware, as if they recognized her kindness and curiosity. The path opened suddenly into a small meadow, round and bright as a bowl of sunshine poured upon the earth. Tall grasses swayed in the breeze, their tops heavy with seeds. Daisies lifted their faces, yellow and white, nodding gently as if drowsy. Bees moved among them, humming a tune older than memory. Red Riding Hood set her basket down for a moment and sat in the grass. She leaned back, her cloak pulling around her, and looked up. The sky through the opening was wide and soft, the clouds drifting like slow ships across a pale blue sea. She picked a daisy and held it close, tracing the petals with her fingertip. "You are perfect," she whispered. Then she tucked it into her basket, beside the bread and honey, where it shone like a tiny sun. The meadow was so peaceful that her eyelids fluttered. For a moment she thought she might nap there, rocked by the breeze, but then she remembered her grandmother waiting. With a soft sigh, she lifted her basket again and returned to the path. As she walked, she thought about her grandmother. She pictured her sitting by the fire, silver hair glowing in the light, telling stories about the stars. She imagined her smile when she received the bread and honey, her delight at the flowers. Red Riding Hood's heart grew warm at the thought. She wanted her grandmother to feel cared for, the same way her grandmother's red cloak made her feel safe. But while she walked and dreamed, the forest carried another traveler along a different path. He was quiet, his paws making hardly a sound on the earth. His fur was gray as smoke, tipped with silver where the sun touched it. His eyes were golden, not cruel, but watchful, curious. His ears twitched at the calls of birds. His nose caught the scents of bread, honey, berries, and flowers drifting on the air. This was the wolf. In this telling, the wolf was not cruel, not fierce, not rushing. He was simply lonely, wandering the forest as Red Riding Hood did, seeking something, perhaps company, perhaps understanding, perhaps a place to rest. And soon, his path and hers would meet. Red Riding Hood followed the path deeper into the forest. Her basket swung gently at her side, her cloak trailed softly across the earth, and her thoughts were still with her grandmother. The air grew cooler beneath the tall pines, the light shifting into long green shadows. She did not feel afraid. The forest was a friend, and she trusted its whispers. And then, between two trees where the ferns grew thick, another figure appeared. The wolf stepped quietly onto the path. His paws pressed softly into the earth, his body moving with the fluid grace of water. His fur was gray and silver, and his eyes glowed golden, catching the light like lanterns. Red Riding Hood stopped. Her breath caught, but not with fear, more with surprise. She had never seen a wolf so close before. The wolf lowered his head politely, as if bowing. His tail swayed once, slowly. When he spoke, his voice was low and smooth, like the forest itself speaking through him. "Good morning, little traveler." Red Riding Hood blinked, then remembered her manners. She lowered her head slightly, as she had been taught to greet elders and strangers alike. "Good morning," she replied, her voice steady. The wolf tilted his head. "Where are you walking, so early, and with such care?" Red Riding Hood lifted her basket slightly. "To my grandmother's cottage," she said. "She lives deeper in the forest. I am bringing her bread, and honey, and berries, and flowers." The wolf's ears twitched at each word, as though savoring the list. "Bread," he repeated softly. "Honey. Berries. Flowers. A fine gift for someone you love." His eyes softened. "Your grandmother must be very dear to you." "She is," Red Riding Hood answered. "She made my cloak. She tells me stories. She teaches me to listen to the forest." The wolf nodded. "She sounds wise." He lifted his nose to the air. "The forest, too, tells stories. If you pause, if you breathe, if you notice." Red Riding Hood's eyes widened. "That's what my grandmother says. That every tree has something to say. That the brook is always singing." The wolf smiled, not with teeth bared, but with quiet warmth. "Your grandmother is right." They walked together for a little while, side by side, though not too close. The path bent gently, opening now and then to let in streams of light. Butterflies flitted above the flowers, and the wolf's golden eyes followed them. Red Riding Hood glanced at him. "Do you walk alone?" she asked softly. "Always," the wolf replied. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay a thread of loneliness. "The forest is wide. I wander. I watch. I listen. But I have no cloak, no basket, no grandmother waiting for me." Red Riding Hood's heart stirred. She looked down at her basket, then back at him. "That sounds lonely." The wolf nodded once. "It is." For a time, neither spoke. The forest filled the silence with its sounds, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of the brook, the call of a jay in the distance. At last, the wolf said, "There are many paths in this forest. Some are quick. Some are slow. If you wish to reach your grandmother soon, you may take the straight road. But if you wish to enjoy the forest, you may wander, pause, notice. The flowers are thick today. The birds are singing. The world is offering you its gifts." Red Riding Hood considered. She looked at the basket. She thought of her grandmother waiting. But she also thought of the meadow she had passed, of the flowers leaning in the light, of the butterfly that had matched her steps. She smiled faintly. "Perhaps I will walk slowly, for just a little while." The wolf inclined his head. "Then I will go ahead. I know the forest well. I will take the straight path to your grandmother's cottage. I will tell the trees you are coming." Red Riding Hood nodded politely. "Thank you." The wolf's tail swayed once more. Then he stepped quietly into the shadows, his form melting into the ferns, his paws silent. Soon he was gone, as though the forest had taken him back. Red Riding Hood stood on the path, her basket warm in her hand, her cloak bright against the trees. She looked where the wolf had gone, then looked forward. She did not feel afraid. The wolf had spoken kindly, almost wistfully. She only felt the echo of his words. The flowers are thick today. The birds are singing. The world is offering you its gifts. And so she walked onward, slower now, pausing to notice more carefully, more deeply, letting the forest's voice sink into her heart. Red Riding Hood walked onward at the forest's pace. Not rushing. Not hurrying. Not chasing time. Just moving gently, step by step, as though she were part of the forest's own slow breathing. Her cloak swayed behind her in little waves of red. Her basket rested comfortably in her hand, the bread and honey and berries safe beneath the cloth, the flowers peeking out like small suns. Every few steps, she paused. Because the forest kept offering her gifts. The first gift was a patch of wild violets. Their petals were the color of twilight, soft purple fading to silver. She bent down and picked one, then two, then three, placing them gently in her basket. "For grandmother," she whispered. The second gift was a cluster of daisies, white petals circling golden hearts. They leaned toward her as though bowing. She picked a few and tucked them in her cloak. The third was a single tall foxglove, its blossoms shaped like little bells. She did not pick it. Instead, she touched one bloom gently with her fingertip and whispered, "You are already perfect where you are." And so the flowers became her quiet companions. Some in her basket, some along the path, some only in her memory. The forest gave her birdsong, too. A robin trilled high above, its song bright and quick, like sunlight skipping across water. A dove cooed low, soft and steady, like a heartbeat. A woodpecker tapped, tap tap tap, as though knocking on the forest's own door. Red Riding Hood stopped often to listen. She tilted her head, trying to hear not just the notes but the spaces between them. They are speaking, she thought. They are telling their stories. She sang back, very softly. Not words, only hums, long and gentle. And for a moment, she thought the birds answered. The path curved to a brook, winding silver through the trees. Red Riding Hood crouched and placed her basket down. She dipped her hands into the water, cool and smooth, and watched ripples spread outward in perfect rings. The brook whispered as it moved, not in words, but in a rhythm that felt like one. Shoo, shhh, shhh. It was the sound of quiet secrets. It was the sound of lullabies. It was the sound of time moving without hurry. She drank a little, the water fresh and clean, tasting faintly of stone and sky. She filled her cupped hands again and let the water fall back slowly, enjoying the way it slipped through her fingers. As she rose, a butterfly fluttered past, its wings painted in orange and black. It hovered, then drifted ahead along the path. Red Riding Hood followed, smiling. "Are you leading me?" she asked softly. The butterfly darted a little farther, then paused again, as though waiting. Step by step, it guided her forward until at last it flew upward, vanishing into the high branches. A squirrel chattered from a low branch. It held an acorn between its paws, nibbling, its tail flicking in rhythm. She laughed and waved. "Good morning," she said. The squirrel tilted its head, then bounded away. Even the trees seemed like companions. One had roots curling above the ground like a staircase. She climbed a few steps, giggling, before stepping back down. Another had bark marked with old scars, like lines of a map, and she traced them with her finger, imagining journeys hidden there. Time drifted differently in the forest. There were no bells to mark the hours, no clocks to tick. Only the steady rocking of the world, wind in the branches, brook in the stones, leaves turning their faces toward the light. Red Riding Hood's footsteps matched this rhythm. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Basket swaying. Cloak whispering. Birds answering. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes softened. Even her thoughts quieted, moving gently like boats on a wide river. She thought of her grandmother, waiting in the cottage. She thought of the wolf, his golden eyes and soft, lonely voice. She thought of the flowers, the brook, the birds. And she realized, the forest was full of stories. Not just in words, but in colors, in scents, in sounds, in silences. Her grandmother had been right. The forest did speak, if only you walked slowly enough to hear it. While Red Riding Hood wandered, the wolf followed the straight path. His paws moved swiftly, his body weaving through the trees. The forest bent to let him pass, for he knew its ways. He was not cruel, not in this telling. But he was curious. He wondered about the girl in the red cloak. He wondered about her grandmother. He wondered about homes with bread and honey, about laughter by the fire. He wondered what it might feel like not to walk alone. And soon, far ahead, he saw a cottage nestled between the trees, its roof low, its windows round, its chimney sending up the faintest curl of smoke. The grandmother's cottage. The forest path ended in a clearing where sunlight poured down in golden streams. There, nestled against the trees, stood a cottage. Its roof was mossy in patches, as though the forest had laid a blanket across it. Its windows were round and glowed faintly in the light, like gentle eyes. A little garden stretched along one side, filled with herbs and flowers, their scents rising sweetly into the air. This was grandmother's cottage. The wolf stopped at the edge of the clearing. Leaves. He breathed in deeply. He smelled the herbs, the wood smoke, and something else, the faintest trace of bread, honey, berries. He stepped forward, quiet as a shadow, and came to the door. He lifted a paw and touched it. The door gave way with a soft creak, as though it had been expecting him. The cottage welcomed him. The air inside was warm and smelled faintly of lavender. A quilt lay folded on a chair. A pot hung over the hearth, though the fire beneath it was low. Sunlight streamed in through the curtains, laying soft golden shapes on the wooden floor. There was no one home. Grandmother had stepped out earlier that morning to gather herbs in the meadow beyond the hill. She had taken her basket and her walking stick and moved slowly, carefully, as she always did. She would return soon, but for now, the cottage was quiet. The wolf padded across the floor. He looked at the table, set neatly with 2 cups and a plate, as though waiting for company. He looked at the shelves, lined with jars of dried fruit and herbs. He looked at the bed in the corner, its blanket smooth, its pillow plump. He felt something stir in him. Not hunger. Not mischief. Only weariness. He had been walking the forest alone for many days, many nights. And here was a place that felt warm, safe, and welcoming. The wolf stepped carefully to the bed. He lowered himself onto it, curling his body into the blankets. He pressed his muzzle against the pillow, his tail wrapped around him, his ears twitching once before they softened. The bed smelled faintly of lavender and herbs, of fresh air drifting in through the window. It smelled like warmth and safety. The wolf sighed, long and low. His body relaxed. His eyes closed. For a while, he simply rested. He dreamed lightly, of walking beside someone instead of alone. He dreamed of laughter in cottages, of porridge and bread, of flowers tucked into baskets. He dreamed of a forest where no one hurried, where everything had time to notice everything else. When he stirred awake again, the wolf's golden eyes blinked in the soft light. He stretched once, his paws pushing against the quilt, and then he laughed softly to himself. What must it be like, he wondered, to live in such a place? To sit in the chair, to sip from the cup, to lie in the bed as though it belonged to me? He looked at the cloak folded on the wall, an older cloak, once red but now faded to brown. Grandmother's cloak from long ago. He pulled it gently around his shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine and smoke, the scent of many winters past. He sat in the chair. It creaked beneath his weight, but it held. He poured a little water from the jug into a cup and lifted it, sipping awkwardly but smiling. He lay back down in the bed, tucking the quilt up to his chin. The wolf chuckled quietly. Perhaps I will pretend to be grandmother, just for a little while. Until the girl in the red cloak arrives. Until I am not alone. His eyes closed again, heavy with drowsiness. His breathing grew slow, steady, deep. And there, in grandmother's cottage, the wolf drifted into a nap, not fierce, not plotting, only resting, waiting, listening to the forest breathe outside the window. Far behind on the winding path, Red Riding Hood wandered still. Her basket was now half full of flowers, her cloak dotted with petals where she had tucked them. She hummed a little tune the brook had sung to her, and the birds hummed back. She was drawing closer, though she did not know it yet. Closer to the cottage. Closer to her grandmother. Closer to the wolf, who was waiting, not in anger, not in hunger, but in curiosity and quiet longing. The forest path curved once more, and there it was. The little cottage with its mossy roof, its garden of herbs, its chimney stretching toward the sky. Red Riding Hood paused at the edge of the clearing. Her heart warmed at the sight. She imagined her grandmother inside, smiling, waiting, the table ready for bread and honey. She adjusted her basket, smoothed her cloak, and walked the final steps to the door. The door creaked as she pushed it gently open. The cottage smelled of lavender, herbs, and the faint sweetness of honey. Light poured through the curtains in golden ribbons. And there, tucked in bed beneath a quilt, lay someone wearing grandmother's cap. Red Riding Hood stepped closer. The figure looked like grandmother, wrapped in the quilt, cap pulled low, eyes shining from the pillow. Yet something seemed different. The room was the same, the quilt the same, the air the same, and still, she paused. She tilted her head. "Grandmother?" she asked softly. The figure shifted, then nodded once, slowly. "Yes, dear," came the reply, low, rumbly, like stones rolling softly in a brook. Red Riding Hood stepped nearer. She smiled politely, but her curiosity stirred. She looked closely at the figure's eyes. They gleamed golden, brighter than she remembered. "Grandmother," she said, tilting her head, "what big eyes you have." The wolf blinked once, then chuckled deep in his chest. "All the better to see you with, my dear." Red Riding Hood giggled softly. "And grandmother, what big ears you have." The wolf swiveled his ears forward, twitching them playfully. "All the better to hear you with, my dear." She stepped closer still, setting her basket on the table. The bread and honey glowed in the light. "And grandmother," she said, smiling wider now, "what a big nose you have." The wolf sniffed the air gently. "All the better to smell the forest you bring with you, flowers, berries, sunshine, and all." Red Riding Hood laughed outright, her eyes sparkling. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "And grandmother, what big teeth you have." The wolf gave a long sigh, not fierce but weary. His lips curved in a small, almost shy smile. "All the better, to smile at you, my dear." Red Riding Hood studied him, her brow furrowing softly. She saw the gray fur peeking from beneath the cap. She saw the long paws resting on the quilt. She saw the golden eyes, gentle but not her grandmother's. Her smile grew calm. "You're not grandmother," she said softly. "You're the wolf I met in the forest." The wolf lowered his head. His ears drooped. His golden eyes blinked once, twice. "It is true," he said, voice quiet as dusk. "I am the wolf. I meant no harm. I was lonely. I wanted to see what it might feel like to rest in a place like this. To pretend, just for a while, that I belonged." Red Riding Hood's heart softened. She reached out and touched the quilt near his paw. "You could have asked," she said gently. The wolf sighed again. "I did not think you would say yes." Underscore 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 underscore. Red Riding Hood thought of the violets, the daisies, the foxglove. She thought of the brook, the butterfly, the deer. She thought of her grandmother's stories, about how the forest welcomed all creatures, if only they treated it kindly. She nodded. "Perhaps next time, you will ask. And perhaps next time, I will say yes." The wolf's ears lifted slightly. His eyes glimmered with something almost like hope. And just then, the door creaked again. The true grandmother stepped into the cottage, her basket of herbs on her arm, her walking stick tapping softly on the floor. She looked from Red Riding Hood to the wolf in her bed, and instead of gasping or crying out, she smiled. "Ah," she said, her voice gentle as a lullaby, "I see we are making new friends." The wolf lowered his head. "I meant no harm," he whispered. "I know," grandmother replied. "The forest told me already." She set her basket down and patted the wolf's shoulder with her wrinkled hand. "You may rest here for a while. But know this. Every home is stronger when kindness is asked for, not borrowed." The wolf nodded slowly. "I understand." Grandmother set her basket of herbs on the table and drew up a chair. The room smelled sweet with lavender, thyme, and mint, mingling now with the fragrance of the bread, honey, and berries that Red Riding Hood had brought. The wolf shifted in the bed, lowering his head shyly. "I should go," he murmured, though his body still ached with weariness. But grandmother shook her head gently. "Stay. If you are tired, rest. If you are hungry, eat. There is enough here for all of us." Red Riding Hood smiled. She lifted the cloth from her basket and placed the food on the table. The bread glowed golden in the sunlight, the honey shone like captured light, the berries sparkled like little jewels. Underscore 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 underscore. They gathered together, not as strangers but as companions. Papa Bear was not there. Mama Bear was not there. But in this cottage, another kind of family was forming, woven by kindness, not by blood. Red Riding Hood broke the bread into 3 pieces. She placed one in her grandmother's hands, one on a small plate for the wolf, and kept one for herself. The wolf stared at his piece of bread for a long time before lifting it with careful paws. He took a small bite, chewed slowly, and his golden eyes softened. "It tastes of hearth and home," he said. Red Riding Hood drizzled honey across her slice. The golden threads gleamed. She offered the jar to her grandmother, who smiled and dipped her bread in. The wolf sniffed, then dared to try a drop. His tail twitched once, shyly. "Sweet," he whispered. "Like sunlight." They ate the berries last. Red Riding Hood handed them out one by one, a berry for grandmother, a berry for the wolf, a berry for herself. Their juice stained her fingertips red, the same red as her cloak, and she laughed softly. When they had finished, they sat quietly for a while, letting the peace of the meal linger. Red Riding Hood spoke first. Grandmother, the wolf pretended to be you. He curled up in your bed. But not to trick or harm, only because he was lonely. Grandmother nodded, her silver hair shining in the light. Sometimes, she said, loneliness makes us do odd things. But what matters is what we choose after, whether we keep pretending, or whether we choose honesty and kindness. The wolf lowered his head. I will choose kindness, he said softly. If you will allow me. Red Riding Hood smiled and reached across the table to rest her hand near his paw. Then you already have. Underscore 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 underscore. Outside, the forest was settling into evening. The sunlight grew long and golden, painting the moss with firelight. Birds sang slower songs, softer songs. The brook whispered the same lullaby it had carried since morning, but now its voice was lower, sleepier. The trees stood tall and steady, their leaves turning silver in the dusk. A breeze moved through, gentle as a sigh, and carried the scent of herbs and flowers through the open window. Inside, the cottage glowed. Underscore 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 underscore. Grandmother smoothed her quilt and patted the bed. Stay the night if you wish, she told the wolf. The forest is wide, and there is no need to hurry through darkness. The wolf curled up again, this time not pretending, not hiding. His breathing slowed, deep and steady. Red Riding Hood rested on a stool near the fire. Her grandmother brushed her hair with gentle hands, the red cloak pulled around her shoulders. Her eyes grew heavy, her breath soft. The fire crackled. The cottage sighed. The forest hummed. And soon, three beings who had begun as strangers rested together in peace, a girl, a grandmother, and a wolf, the night wrapping them in safety. Underscore 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 underscore. So it was that little Red Riding Hood learned the forest's greatest lesson. That curiosity is good when it is gentle. That kindness is stronger than fear. And that even wolves grow softer when given a place at the table. The stars rose above the trees, one by one, steady as lanterns. The moon drifted high, silver and calm. The forest breathed. The cottage glowed. And sleep came quietly, softly, to all who listened. The end.